Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and the game's dying again, so let's make a video about it. Alright, so I am just kind of joking a little bit. The game's not actually dying, but what did happen is we got the first big WGP result for Set 7's format, and it's looking very blue. So I pulled up Different Fights tweet about this because I think it does include very important context where this one does not have diversity cut and was a singles format, so there's not really any incentive to play anything other than the best deck. And it's looking like the results are reflecting that because 19 out of the top 32 was Bavsargra, with 7 of them converting into top 8. You know, it's like Bavsargra, 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 Bavsargra. Okay, and then one Love and Berry. And it's like, that's a very concerning result. You know, I and I think a lot of people saw the reveals for Bob Saga and thought, okay, it's a very strong deck. It's definitely meta for sure, but my own experience with it was like there are a lot of moving pieces, so I just pulled up one of the first place deck lists. I was like, okay, the new Restander is very powerful, gives the deck more attacks, but you do have to draw into it. You know, you kind of have to be able to manage like your counterblast to be able to pay for the Restander and like Varlords. You also kind of need to find all of your dress boosters to be able to like get the power going. And so I figure like that inconsistency combined with like kinda needing to know how the, like, gameplay loop with, like, arming multiple cards kinda works out and what gives you, like, the best impact meant that the deck would be strong, but not overwhelmingly dominant. So kinda like how Levidross has been performing in the current format, right? Where, like, it clearly is the best deck, but has enough inconsistencies that it doesn't feel completely overwhelming. And then, you know, we get the first results here, and it's completely overwhelming. So, that's a thing. And of course, you know, because of this result, a lot of people are immediately kind of jumping to, like, ban it, which I never love that immediate response. I always want to be at least a little more tempered in my response to these sorts of things, where it's like, the fact that there is no diversity cut and it's singles formats, and it's kind of like the first big event. You know, Bob Saga has also topped a lot of smaller events, but it felt more in line with how like top meta decks usually perform, where like, yes, it is the most represented, but other things are kind of present. So I wonder like how much of that is like this additional factor of like there's no diversity cut, and Buff Sakura does play well into the established meta of like Reziel and Levidross. You know, how much that affected this major turnout for the deck, and how much of it is the deck just being that powerful. So, you know, like I was saying, a lot of people were like calling for potential bans. I think there are a couple if Bushiroad wanted to be reactionary about this because, you know, a potential tier 0 format is a very bad look. You know, I do think starting set 5, the power creep has gotten really out of hand in terms of like the top decks. It's very weird because you have decks like Levidross, like Reziel, like Bob Saga now that feel like they're being pushed really, really hard, but then you go a little bit underneath that, like all of the other destined ones, even the other things in set 7, like Artisaria and Vice Ruger, all feel like competent decks that are strong but not overwhelming, and that are just kind of being pushed down by the top decks being so far ahead of them. Where like I feel like if you brought those down, it could open up the format a little bit. I don't even really hate the current stride decks in the meta. Like I think Messiah is fine. But there are a couple of like potential bans because I think we are getting a product announcement soon, so that would be the time for a ban list. The easy slap on the wrist ban if you wanted to hit Bob Saga immediately is of course Drag Veda. This overtrigger kind of needed to go back in 2021 when they introduced the concept of overtriggers, but you know, I have always said that regardless of the 100 million, the additional effect of a lot of these OTs are just game winning themselves. Like Dragveda restands your Vanguard. That is the entire game plan of some decks, and you get to just do it for free because you managed to check the one card. That's crazy. So similar to like when they hit Shiranui the first time, where they didn't really want to hit it and just gave it a slap on the wrist. Like hitting Drag Veda is the easy result. Another thing I had in mind, which I don't think I've seen anyone else try to float yet, but maybe could be interesting is what if we limited like the new arms cards? Because a lot of the deck lists I was seeing play them at 2 copies, and like something you can do with like the sword, for example, when it's played gives your front row 5k, so you could like arm the sword with maybe like Bob Sagra's effect, and then you overdress into a Varlord, arm another copy of the sword that gets you like 10k to the front row. That means like if you persona ride, suddenly the like restanding grade 2 is 30k for both swings, and if you have like a trick moon, you can get all the way up to 50k, and that is a lot. Like, I'm not gonna deny that when Bavsargra hits its ceiling, it does go kind of crazy. So I wonder if hitting the arms card and at least making that gameplay loop more complicated, where it's like, okay, now you gotta like arm the sword and then you gotta arm the hammer so that you can get the sword back into the drop zone. Then you have to find another way to like rearm the sword if you want that continuous 10k to the front row and the triple drive. So it would just be a little more complicated. It would bring the ceiling down a little bit because you can't pull it off all the time. And like there's some inconsistency going first where you could potentially damage it, just floating that idea out there. A lot of people I think are immediately calling for like Varlord to be hit, which I don't think they're going to do. This very much reminds me of like Tier 0 Luard back in V, where they decided to hit Nemain, and Nemain was kind of the big hyped up card that everyone was buying out. So it kind of crashed the market and pissed off all the vendors. I feel like if we emergency ban Varlord, a similar thing would happen. So for me, limiting the new arms cards would be kind of a stopgap measure of this will hit the game plan of the deck a little bit. It'll probably bring down the ceiling or at least make the ceiling harder to achieve, which could affect like how dominant Bob Saga is. I doubt a change like this will substantially change its place in the meta, but it's like, okay, at least it's an in-engine thing. It's only like a rare and a double rare, so it's probably not going to crash the market, especially if you were only getting 2 of them in the first place. Like, this could be a good, just like optics move to be like, okay, yes, we know Bob Saga is tier 0. Here's something we can do to like hit it in the short term, and then once the actual like meta cycle goes through, where you have a bit more time to play with the deck, we can see about a more substantial hit like Varlord. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Tier 0 Bavsargra. I'm not gonna proclaim that it's completely game destroying right now. I want to see if there are more results similar to this, and if there is, I want to see if there is maybe a compromise with like a mediocre hit that signals to people that they're taking the situation seriously without like killing the deck in such a way that it ruins the market. But let me know what you all think. But for now, that is going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye!